can hear me okay? Yeah. And since I'm officially in teaching mode now, I think I legally can take this off. There we go. Okay. David and Goliath is where we're going today. And so just keep in mind, David has been anointed as the new king, but he is not yet reigning as the new king. And yet, because he is anointed, he really kind of is the new king, right? Well, what does the new king need? Training, right? He needs training for this new position that he's going into. And I would suggest that as we look at the early parts of the life of David, we are going to see David going through God's training school in big ways. And this is going to be one of those ways, where we're going to see a variety of things that will hopefully help him as he eventually assumes the role as king fully and completely. So, getting started, consider this statement. Training for a job, an athletic event, personal growth can be both frustrating and exciting. Left side, you guys think frustrating. Right side, you guys are thinking exciting. Okay? Give you a quick minute, and then we'll hear some thoughts. Did I give you guys frustrating or exciting? Frustrating? According to me, left. Frustrating, yeah. All right, let's hear some quick thoughts. Not looking for brilliance, but just get us rolling. Why can training be frustrating? New territory. Whenever you do something new, it can be hard. Chris? If it's something you already know, but you have to go through the training anyway, it can be kind of a frustrating experience. Our daughter-in-law Abby worked at Sinai Samaritan Hospital for 2 years, and then vicar year they went out to Montana, and she came back and got her job back, and in Montana she worked as a labor and delivery nurse, just as she had at Sinai Samaritan. She came back to Sinai Samaritan, and they made her go through training. So, yeah, and it's as you can imagine, it's been a little slow. Other frustrating thoughts in regards to training? Sue, what you got?
I think it would be very frustrating because opposite what Chris said, you might not know anything, and you don't know anyone, and you don't know how the people are going to act towards you or how you're going to act towards them, and if you've never done it before. My daughter's going to be going through this in a couple of weeks. She was in daycare, and now she's starting office stuff. Never done an office stuff before, so I can imagine that she's going to find it very frustrating at first because, and then she has to do virtual training versus.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, I'll just repeat some of it. Correct me if I get anything wrong. But Sue went the other direction, that if you don't know anything about it, wow, you're trying to figure out this new stuff, and you may not know the people who you're with, and so you may not know how they interact, and are they joking, are they serious, how do they communicate, yeah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It can be frustrating. Did I get it about right? Good enough? Okay. Let's bounce to this side. Exciting. Training is exciting. Gina. Everything new can be exciting. Yes. Yep. If you haven't tried it, we have to try it because we might be missing the best thing ever. Somebody sang A Mighty Fortress Is Our God for the first time ever. Are you glad they did? Yes. We're glad they did. What else? Exciting. Ethan, what are you thinking?
It's interesting to track progress.
Fun to see progress, fun to see improvement, to see where you were and where you get to. Excellent. Is that a hand up? No, that was just a, okay. Jenny.
It's fun to think about what the end result of the training would be. Usually you're training for something, but then thinking about what that end result is.
Okay, so you've got an end goal in mind, and it's exciting to get there. Did I hear that correctly? Okay. Yeah, I sometimes have a hard time hearing through the masks. The muffle thing makes it hard to hear sometimes. So good. Yeah, excellent. Well, David is in training to be king. Kind of interesting that part of his training to be king is going to be watching sheep. But part of his training to be king is going to be going and being a battler, going and being a warrior. And that's what you're going to see with him today. The picture on the top right of that is a picture from when we were at Kirbet Uja El Foka in the summer of 2019. And that's Pastor Scott Mosier, who went on the archaeological dig trip with us. And he found that stone. And that's the kind of stone that David would have used when he killed Goliath. When we hear, and which we'll read in a few minutes, that David chose 5 smooth stones out of the riverbed, I think when I was growing up, I was picturing like little rocks like gravel. No, think racquetball sized or tennis ball sized, right? And then what would happen is they would take leather thongs or a leather strap that had like thongs at the end and, or knots at the end. And so this thing was probably folded in half about this long. And the warrior would take it like this, and at the right moment he'd let go of one side of the leather strap so that stone would go flying out of there. Now think about a major league pitcher and how much velocity a major league pitcher can deliver just with his arm. Now make his arm 2 feet longer, okay? And you think about the kind of velocity that you could put into play through one of these. It's absolutely amazing. That was a serious weapon. And when David fired that stone, that was a missile. And just incredible. So it was really cool to find one of those and to be able to make that connection up with the Bible account. Now, they've found lots and lots of those throughout the land of Israel, so that's not an unusual find at all. But this one said on it, this is the stone that David used to kill Goliath. I'm kidding. But it was just cool to see it and get a visual for it and go, now I get it. Now I get it. And so I wanted to put the picture on the sheet so you maybe would have a chance to get it as well. Okay, on your own, go ahead and read through 1 Samuel chapter 17. And there are 6 questions on the front of the sheet. And I'd ask you to work your way through each of those 6 questions. You're going to check out David and Saul and Goliath. And then there's some other questions on there for you to deal with. It'll probably take you a good 15 minutes, I'd imagine. And so I'll go read some ESPN or something. And well, you guys are working your way through it. Making sense? Okay, I would guess most of you are probably pretty close. And first I'm going to do is going to break you in half, and we're going to take 2 of the questions and I'll let groups report on it. So you guys focus attention on Goliath. What do we learn about Goliath from these verses? Okay? You guys are going to focus on Saul. What do we learn about Saul from these verses? And we'll take David later. But you guys start with Goliath. You guys start with Saul. Okay? So talk to each other as you can. I realize you're kind of spread out, but kind of share thoughts with each other for a couple quick minutes, and then we'll report to each other. All right, let's go ahead and compare notes real quickly. You guys are Goliath, so talk to me about Goliath. What did you learn about Goliath in these segments? Sue, get us started.
Well, he was really strong. He was so tall, I just can't picture a 9-foot-tall person.
Yeah,
And I don't know how much a shekel weighs, but the shekel and his javelin or whatever weighed a lot.
yeah.
So much.
The tip of his javelin spear in modern day, our language, would probably be about 15 pounds. Now, figuring out weights and units of money and things like that are notoriously difficult in regards to ancient things. It's just hard. I mean, think about it for yourself. What is $1 worth? Well, are you talking in 2020? Are you talking in 1950? Or are you talking in 1850? I mean, the difference would be dramatic. And that's just for our money that we understand. Now take it and put it into a different culture that's hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and it's difficult. But weights, we sometimes feel like we have a little bit better handle on, and that the tip of his spear seems to be about 15 pounds. Now you think about that. Hey, you're firing a spear with a tip that weighs 15 pounds. Whew! When that baby hits, it's going to hit hard, for sure. His height, it's interesting that there are a number of textual variants in the Hebrew. You boys who've got your Hebrew luggage, you should pull up the textual variants and check them out. One of the manuscripts actually says that he was 4 cubits high, and a span. So a cubit is about 18 inches. The cubit was from the end of the elbow to the end of the middle finger. That's a cubit. And for most people, that's about 18 inches. And so, so if he was 4 cubits tall plus a span, that would make him 6 feet, and a span was usually thought of, that's from the tip of your thumb to the tip of your pinky finger. And I've got really small hands, so my span is pretty small. But it's usually thought to be about 9 inches. And so if the textual variant that he's 4 cubits is right, that would make him 6'9". One textual variant puts him at 5 cubits. So add another 18 inches to that. So that would make him, about 7.5 feet, give or take, something like that. Another one says that he was 16 cubits tall. That would make him 24 feet tall. plus a span, so 24 feet 9 inches. I'm guessing that one was inaccurate, and it would be pretty easy to explain that one, that the scribe accidentally put in an extra letter that's there. Hebrew did their numbers using letters. Aleph was 1, Beth, the second letter was 2. It'd be like if A was 1, B is 2, C is 3, and once you get up to 10, it starts to flip. So that's the way they did it. Kind of like Roman numbers. Roman numerals were a similar type thing. So there is some question as to exactly how tall Goliath was. The best text does say that he was about 9 foot tall. That's our best text. So the 6 cubit thing would put him at about 9 foot tall plus 9 inches, which would make him to be a huge man. Even if he was only 6'9", for those days, that would make him to be a huge man, because we think that the average man at that time was about 5 foot tall. Well, if you're 5 foot tall, any of you guys 5 foot tall? Any of your kids about 5 foot? Kyla, are you about 5 foot tall? 5 what? You're 5'7"? Oh, you are that tall, okay. 5 foot tall? Do you mind standing up, Mrs. Schultz? So this is the height of the average guy. Adam, you're probably the tallest guy in here. Go ahead and stand up. Well, Adam looks pretty huge in comparison to Miss Schultz, right? He just does. And so now if you add to it, if Goliath is another 5-6 inches taller than Adam, in comparison to Miss Schultz, he looks huge. So even if the textual variant is right, and he's only 6'9", that still makes him just monstrously larger than any of the other guys. How large is the guy in the Bucks team? Which one? Giannis Antetokounmpo? He's 6'11", isn't he?
Last year I was honored by the Bucks, and we had our picture taken with Brooke Lopez.
Yeah.
He's exactly 7 feet, and we together with him. I looked up. Can you imagine 9 feet?
Yes. Yeah. And the question, thank you, that's a great analogy for it. A great picture of it too. And some people ask the question, well, how in the world could a guy get to be so big like that? Well, if you've got one of those diseases of the, what's the word I'm looking for? What's the part of my glands that makes me grow? I heard about 10 things. What? The pituitary? If your pituitary gland is malfunctioning, it could toss too much hormones into your system, and yeah, you can get pretty big. In our society with modern day medicine, we have ways to knock that down so that it doesn't happen. You can normalize it, but you didn't have that back then. And so is it possible that there were some people who got to be just huge, and that it may have also passed itself down? There are some ruins near or in what we would call Philistia, where the blocks and stuff for the walls and the houses are just oversized. And so was there actually a group of people who had this issue and were just lots bigger than other people were? It's possible. It's possible, okay? All right. What else do we know about Goliath? Chris? Yeah, this guy has been trained as a warrior since he was little. This is what he does. And of course, if he was huge all the way along, you can kind of understand why that's what he did. So this is a cold-blooded killer. Excellent. Joyce, was your hand up again? Yeah. He was flaunting the Israelites for 40 days and came out, and not only was he flaunting the Israelites, but he was also flaunting the Israelites' God. Interesting. He's got pretty big assumptions about himself, doesn't he? He thinks of himself rather highly as he flaunts not only the Israelites, but the Israelites' God. Absolutely. Anything else that you caught about Goliath? There's one kind of surprising thing. Who came out with Goliath? A shield bearer. Why isn't Goliath carrying his own shield? Finally, we don't know for sure. Some people suggest that that when the pituitary gland goes nuts and it causes this mega size, that it also causes a couple of other things. That it causes poor eyesight, and then it causes your reflexes to be very, very slow. And so he may have had it sounded like he was using a child or a younger person to be his shield bearer. It may be that he needed that because he didn't have the reflexes needed to fend off like arrows that were flying his direction or something like that. So that's a possibility. I've actually read one commentator who suggests that David had the decided advantage when he went out to fight Goliath because of Goliath's this possibility of Goliath being hard to see and etc. Because you did notice in there Goliath. It's not till David gets close to him that Goliath seems to see who David is, and seems to see that he's just a youth. A na'ar is the Hebrew word, that he's just and that's often translated boy. And so Goliath doesn't seem to recognize that till David gets pretty close. And then we're told that David ran towards Goliath quickly. Why does it tell us that he ran towards Goliath quickly? Well, yeah, if this guy has poor reflexes and he can't react very well, a quick movement is going to be one that's going to catch him off guard a whole lot more easily than just coming slowly and steadily. Makes sense? And so there are some who think that, like I said, there are some commentators who actually think David had the advantage as this battle took place. Never thought of it that way before, did you? Huh? Yeah, I know. The first time I heard it, I was like, wow, that sounds crazy. But, okay, I kind of get it. All right, and we exhausted Goliath. Got enough out of him, yes? Let's go over to Saul. What do we learn about Saul? Luke, you want to get us going?
Well, we know that Saul is the biggest among the Israelites, so he's probably the closest match, but he's still too afraid to face.
Yeah, Luke pointed out, and it's not in this text, but we're told when Saul was coronated that he stood a head taller than any of the Israelites. Saul was also a big man. He was a big guy, and yet he's still terrified of Goliath, which would tend to indicate that Goliath probably was at least 6'9", if not more than that. Maybe that 9-foot thing is the correct reading. What else do we learn about Saul? Isn't that an interesting insight? He would rather send out a little kid than go out himself. Boy, do you like that about King Saul? Not hardly. You wonder what was going on in his mind as David comes and says, yeah, I'll take him on. You know, David is probably 15, 16, 17. He's old enough to make this trip to get to his brothers and get to the battlefront. He's not old enough yet to be in the army, apparently, although he's very quickly going to be impressed into Saul's service. That's coming next week. We're going to find out that David gets impressed into Saul's service as a warrior. So he's got to be on the edge of manhood, kind of, sort of, but he isn't quite there yet. And yet Saul's okay with sending him off to battle. Really? Wow. Gina.
Saul, but his faith is not very good. God can prevail for the Israelites.
Yeah, the biggest issue with Saul is, of course, a spiritual issue. That there does not seem to be a trust that God can prevail in spite of the physical differences that seem to be there. Yes, young Mr. Poston. Can you pull your mask down? I couldn't quite hear you.
Saul acted like he didn't even know David.
Yeah. Did you catch that at the end? Whose son is this? Do you remember last week what we'd studied at the end of the lesson? He should have known who he was. Yeah, because David is in there in his court playing the harp for him. And yet here David is, and Saul's having to say, who is this? Assuming this is in chronological order, which we don't know for sure, but there doesn't seem to be any reason that it should have been written in non-chronological order. So assuming this is in chronological order, what insights does that give you into Saul? Possibly his mind is going.
Because that's why he was last chapter said he was plagued by God's spirit.
Yeah, the last chapter told us that he was plagued by an evil spirit sent by the Lord. And was that part of it? That he was losing his ability to remember people? Maybe. Or he didn't pay attention much, and particularly to those who were serving him. And I tend to think that might be the best way to understand this. That it gives you the insight that Saul had become arrogant. Yeah, there's some kid who's playing the harp for me. Whatever. Doesn't even bother to find out what his name is. Wow. I think that's probably the best way to understand this, is that it shows you Saul's arrogance and lack of care for the people who are serving him. That would certainly be consistent with other things that we see in Saul and his life. Okay? Other things that you saw about Saul. What else did you see there about Saul? Anything? Risa, I think your hand was up, wasn't it? We already covered it? Okay. Kevin, was that a hand?
Just a little thing that I never noticed before, that he sends David off with the blessing of the Lord, who he's not trusting to bless them. And we've probably all done that, where we'll say God bless you without a lot of thought, but hopefully there's faith behind it, and that's why we're saying it. But then you do hear, even non-believers sometimes saying, I'll pray for you, or God bless you, and they don't really know what they're saying. It just seems like the right thing to say, or that's what they were raised to say, or what they feel the situation dictates politically or something. But
Yeah, great points. What exactly is Paul saying when he says the Lord bless you or the Lord go with you? I don't remember exactly how it reads. Wow. I mean, everything else about what you see about Saul here doesn't give you a whole lot of hope that he actually means it. But he at least says it.
This might be reading too much into it, but what do you think the motivation was for Saul giving David his own personal armor? Because I'm sure there's an armor, they've been there for 40 days, they have armor all at once probably. They give him any armor, but why his own personal?
Yes, Chris has got a great question. Why does Paul give David his armor? You've got a whole army there, et cetera, et cetera. The most likely answer to that question is that there weren't that many people with armor, and that Saul may have been one of the very few Israelites who had armor. The likelihood of more of them going to battle with some sort of like a leather shield and maybe a sword. A whole lot of them were probably using those slings, would have probably been a likelihood. So it's very possible, if not probable, that Saul's armor was the only one that was there. There may have been a couple of others. Why Saul doesn't maybe grab somebody else and have them be put on David, since it would be a little closer to a fit.
My thought behind that was he would probably think this little kid is going to get killed and he's going to lose his armor.
Yeah.
Why would he even give it up?
It's a great point. If Chris said, if he probably thinks this little kid's going to get killed and then he's going to end up losing his armor besides, why would he do that? I don't know. I've never thought about that. I've got nothing. I think I saw Kevin and then Gina.
until he said that, I was thinking maybe Saul wants everybody to associate this battle coming up with King Saul.
Maybe.
But knowing that he's not expecting David to win, you wouldn't think that would be his motivation, because
Then
it would only reflect poorly on him.
it would reflect poorly on him. Yes, Gina.
I read it as an honor that Saul was bestowing on David for stepping up. He's the only one that stepped up to go against Goliath, and he put his robe on him.
So Gina pointed out that maybe Saul is trying to show David a sense of honor by allowing him to wear his armor. Could be. This is one we'll have to put on your bucket list when you get to heaven. You can ask King David. Unfortunately, I don't think you'll be able to ask King Saul. Just one of the tragic stories in the scriptures. Sue.
I'm just thinking too that if Saul was big and David is just a young boy, it's really not going to fit him at all well. And I'm glad that David didn't want to wear it because it just made him probably stumble or fall.
Yeah, yeah. David made a wise choice in saying, I can't do this. These are cumbersome. I would be in trouble if I went and tried to do battle in something like this, and so he didn't do it. All right, let's let that go. David is a really interesting study in this section, isn't he? What'd you learn about David? We'll just take it together, throw out thoughts on the table. There's a whole bunch of things you could have seen about King David. Luke.
He's not just serving Saul. I'm assuming it's chronological. He's not just serving Saul, but he's still serving Saul.
Yeah, so David apparently has got sort of a dual life where he is at home probably most of the time, but he is also serving Saul when the need be, when there's need for him to serve Saul. Joyce.
So to speak, comfortable in his own skin.
He is comfortable in his own skin, that's for sure. Because he gets there and he has no problem with starting to ask around, so what's going to happen for the guy who goes and fights this Philistine? And hears from one guy, well, maybe he's not telling me the truth, or maybe he doesn't have the full story. What did you hear is going to be done for the guy who kills this Philistine? Risa.
In verse 34 and following, it sounds at first like David's bragging about his own strength, but then you realize he's just confessing his faith about how God is actually leading him.
Yeah, Risa pointed out that it sounds as if David is being braggadocious a little bit when he tells the stories about the bear and the lion. But then he gives total credit to God. However, what did his brother said about him? I know how conceited you are. Was that a lie? Or was that the truth?
I think it was partially the truth.
It at least could be.
Well, the main reason was because he kind of repeated back to Goliath what Goliath said, about that he's going to kill him and he's going to cut off his head and do all this sort of stuff. And, I mean, to me that sounds pretty conceited.
Or at least very confident. Now, you might also look at that as warrior speak. Warriors have a way of speaking to each other that's a little different than the way we non-warriors speak to each other. So it could be as simple as that. There's almost like this trash talk going on between them. I don't know. Luke, your hand was up.
It could be concerning the trouble David gets into later on in his life.
Yeah?
And this could be just what that goes to.
Yeah? Luke points out that David is going to get himself in some trouble later on in life. Was there some degree of arrogance there? Stop and think from just one thing. David has been anointed to be the new king, and none of his brothers were. Do you think that might have had some impact? Think there might have been some jealousy going on there? I'm guessing. So, is it possible that his brother was telling the truth? Yeah. Is it possible that it was actually his brother who was jealous, and so his brother was kind of projecting it onto David where the issue was really with the brother? I think that's at least a possibility too, but we have to hold it out that it could be a possibility that David was conceited. We have to hold that out as a possibility. The first question that David asks about when he hears Goliath is, what's the reward? Do you think that's important? Why? It may go towards his motivation as to why he wants to do this. I would also suggest it might go towards his confidence. I can beat him. And so, well, what happens if I go beat him? And so it could go towards his confidence that he is that confident in his ability to go out and do this. Wow. Oh, what would I get for it? I'd be kind of interested too. Kevin.
I'm still formulating confident in faith, not confident in himself. And they confided that.
Yeah, and where is that line between being confident in faith and being confident in myself? That's a hard thing to take. You do see the fact that David was willing to do this. This is a unique personality. How many of us are walking up to the battle line going, oh, there's this giant man out there who's issued a challenge. Let's go. I'll take him. I mean, how many of us are doing that? I'm not doing that.
I think he got wound up in all of the hoopla because he was just approaching while they were giving the war cry, and that might have.
Did he get just fired up and this was an emotional thing and then he was going, oh nuts, what did I just do? I've already committed, I can't back out. I mean, I guess it's possible, we don't know, but he did have the opportunity. He asked around, and then he has to be taken to Saul, so he's got some time to think about this. So I don't know that I would.
No, I'm just saying that.
Yeah, it might have started with that, but it seems to me that he is confident enough to take this on. That makes him incredibly unique. That he is willing to take on something like this just tells you that David is a unique character. He just is. You know, when you look at all of David's character, and that's part of the fun of studying the life of David, here's this warrior, battler, king, who's also a wonderful harpist and who writes all kinds of psalms. And it just seems to be such an unusual combination of gifts, you know? Yeah, I mean, it's so unusual to see all that combination going together. Anything else on David that you wanted to get out there? Sue?
I have a question. Maybe this is something guys don't want to women. Why do you have to cut off his head and like parade it around?
Why does he have to cut off his head and parade it around? Well, I would guess, first of all, the value of cutting off the head is to make it absolutely obvious that Goliath's dead. And so there's probably just, these people are spread out. The Elah Valley, I should have put a picture there again. From the Elah Valley, you can basically, everything kind of flows up to the ridge on which Jerusalem and Bethlehem sit. And so you can't quite see Bethlehem from the Elah Valley, but we're probably talking 8-10 miles, something like that. I mean, it's a very doable journey for a person who's used to walking and moving. And yet, the battlefronts are separated. Boy, I was going to say about the length of our church, but it's even more than that. I don't know, probably think from the front of the church to, well, probably about a block. I'd say it's probably about a city block is in between there. So you've got a decent amount of space. And so to just cut off Goliath's head and be able to hold it up says to the Israelites, we win. And says to the Philistines, you lose. So there's probably that. There's probably also just some of the warrior mentality. This is how I show my dominance is probably a part of it. Past that, I'm not sure.
I think that was typical of wars in ancient times when they took the corpses and they paraded them through the city.
Yeah.
Victory.
Very true. It was very true, and that's a great point. It was very clear in ancient times that this was something that they just did. A lot of the wars were very, very brutal. The Assyrians particularly would take people they had killed and they'd put their spears in the ground and they'd impale the people they had killed on the spears, or just the skulls of the people they had killed, and would impale them on the spears and stick them up outside of the next city that they were going to attack. So there was a lot of psychological warfare that was going on. Larry, was your hand up?
Say not just ancient times. Remember what they did to Mussolini?
Yeah, I was thinking of Mussolini too.
Okay.
Mussolini. Put his body up.
Yeah, they hung his body upside down in the public square,
Yeah.
and invited people to just come and kick him in the head.
Wow. So they did that with Mussolini. I don't think I knew that they hung his body out in the square and invited people to come and kick the corpse. Wow, yeah. God is great, beer is good, and people are crazy. It's That old boy knew his theology and his sociology. So I can't give you much more than that, Sue. We do hear that David grabbed Goliath's armor, which most of the armor would have been way too big for him, but the sword, David apparently was able to make some use of the sword. He uses it later on down the trail. It had to be huge. Chris, I think I saw your hand.
I just keep on going with the head thing. He took it all the way to Jerusalem, and then all the way back to Saul. So I just can't imagine it not being like some sort of trophy thing.
Yeah, Chris made the point that he takes this to Jerusalem, and then eventually it comes back to Saul, and he can't imagine how it couldn't have been some sort of trophy, and I'd agree with that. Jerusalem is the big city close by. Now, when you're thinking big city, at that point it's probably like 5,000 people, okay? We're not talking huge, but in those days, that's a big city. And David is a local kid made good, so what does he do? He goes to the big city and shows off a little bit. Takes the armor, takes the head. Look! Huh? Yeah, and so he's a late teen, most likely. And does that fit with where most teens would be at who've just won a big battle? Sure. So I don't think there's I would not have any doubts about that being some sort of a trophy. Let's bounce to question number 6. David is the king in training. I ask you to decide on 3 ways God might have been training David, or if you want to think about it differently, 3 lessons David might have learned through this whole thing. Joyce, get us started. Her hand went flying in the air.
Here that Goliath was on his side and Israel's side. He trusted in God.
What a wonderful reminder for him that God really was on his side and on the side of the Israelites. It sure didn't look like David should win that battle from human perspective. David won that battle. Luke.
Well, it's also helping to teach him to be bold.
Taught him to be bold. Yeah, for sure. Yes.
It taught him to be a strong and courageous.
Can you say it again? I couldn't quite hear it.
It taught him to be a strong and courageous
It's taught him to be a strong
and courageous king.
and courageous king. Nice.
Along those same lines, the idea of servant leadership. He saw what needed to be done and he did it himself, unlike Saul.
So the idea of servant leadership. And thank you for bringing out the contrast. He saw the contrast here between a poor leader who didn't step up to the plate and do what needed to be done, and good leadership, which allowed it. Chris, was your hand up, or Megan?
I just said that God was teaching him that God is bigger than any obstacle in our life. So like later when the thing with Bathsheba and all the stuff he goes through, like that's all built upon that God's got this. He's bigger than whatever I'm facing.
God is bigger than anything in your life. What a wonderful lesson for us to take from this lesson, huh? For sure. What else? Ethan.
Right before he fights Goliath, God gives him the opportunity to proclaim his name. He says that the Lord is the one that's going to do this and save us.
So he learned about the value of proclaiming the name of the Lord, and he gives the glory to God as he goes out to fight. Yeah, you come against me with a sword and a spear, fine. I come against you in the name of the Lord. You think you've got the advantage? No. God's on my side. Advantage me. And so I come at you in the name of the Lord.
As a leader, he learned how to go through his strengths and put aside things that would weaken him, so like the armor, that sort of stuff. He said, nope, I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use my sling. I know it. I'm confident with it.
Excellent. So he learned as a leader to play to his strengths. Putting that armor on that belonged to Saul might have been, kind of cool and maybe sort of an honor to wear the king's armor and all that, but it would have hindered him. And so wise leader says, that's not my strength. I'll get other people to do those things who are good at it. I need to play towards my strengths and work on those. And so, as the king, I think that would have been a valuable lesson for him to learn, for sure. Let's flip to the back. First of all, I'd ask you to write down 2 questions you want to ask. Did your questions get answered? over the course of this? I kind of guessed that they might, but are there any other questions out there that did not get answered? Liz?
Why didn't they honor the deal that's supposed to be, you win with your sword?
Yeah. Why didn't they honor the deal? I'm guessing that no one took the deal real seriously, would be my answer on that one.
I still want to know how much a shekel weighs.
How much does a shekel weigh?
I know you said about 15 pounds and 600, so looks like the value that you figured out, but
Yeah, remind me, how many shekels was his spear tip? And by the way, his armor may have weighed as much as 125 pounds.
I have a
Saul's armor.
study guide, and it doesn't tell me my study guide how much a shekel weighs.
Okay. How many shekels was the spear tip?
Iron coin weighs
600 shekels? And we said that'd be about 15 pounds. I don't know, Sue, pull out your smartphone and use the calculator mode. 40 shekels to a pound could be. Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, because 4 times 15 is 60. So, okay. He does end up marrying one of Saul's daughters, but it doesn't happen right away. Saul does offer it fairly quickly, and David kind of pushes it off and says, no, I don't want to. Why exactly he does that, we're not absolutely sure, but it seems as if David has a crush on one of Saul's other daughters. And so he doesn't want to marry this daughter because he'd like to marry that one. Except for the daughter that Saul was offering him was the older one. And so it may have been just as simple as David waiting, and he will eventually marry that younger one. But that's a ways down the trail. So good question. Nice job of seeing the detail there. Good work. Any other questions that you had? Luke?
Yeah, you touched on it earlier that it kind of seems like this is after, like how the chapters are laid out. It comes out after he's anointed and he is Saul's servant, but it also kind of sounds like Saul doesn't know it. So it doesn't, kind of also seems like he's been anointed but not yet in Saul's service.
Mm-hmm. Or at least not permanently in Saul's service. He seems to be kind of getting called in a little bit at a time to do the harpist job, but not really doing anything else. It seems to be once in a while. And there is something real valuable that you do see in David there, and that is he is willing to be a servant. You know, his dad says, go take this 3/5 of a bushel of grain. Well, that'd have been a little heavy to carry for 8-10 miles, along with some breads and some cheeses. He's got a pretty decent load on his shoulders, and he's walking the 8-10 miles that it probably was. And I didn't double check that mileage, by the way, but I think if my memory is that's about 8-10 miles from Bethlehem to the battle site, maybe a touch more than that, but it wouldn't have been a lot more, I don't think. And he does what his dad tells him to do. And so you seem to see somebody who is obedient to his parents and has honor for his father and mother. That's a good thing. A good thing for sure. Flip your page over. Let's take number 2. All Scripture is ultimately focused on Jesus, who serves as our ultimate prophet, priest, and king. Perhaps one of the reasons God gave us this account, it gives us some hints about Jesus, the ultimate king. Jesus is often described as the son of David. He's often called the son of David. And so one of the things that looking in the life of David can do, we have to be careful how far we push it, but it can give us some hints about Jesus, our real king. So, decide on 3 thoughts we might pull from this, comparisons between the life of Saul, or the life of David here, this account, and the work of Jesus. Luke, get us started.
I suppose like death and sin in general can be Goliath in that situation. And Jesus is apparently a man, but he's also God.
Yeah, so death and sin look to be insurmountable obstacles. Kind of like Goliath looked to be an insurmountable obstacle, huh? And David goes out there and seems a very unlikely warrior to take down the giant. And yet he does. Who is the unlikely warrior who takes down the giants of sin and death? A baby born in Bethlehem, placed in a manger. Really? Guy who has no place to lay his head. Really? Yeah. Very cool. Excellent. What else? Sue?
I'm just thinking they were both shepherds.
Yeah. Jesus is described as the good shepherd. We're never told that he ever worked as a shepherd. He worked as a carpenter for as much as we know. He was the carpenter's son, and we assume he was trained in the carpentry trade, which may have included some masonry stuff. That Greek word that's used is could be a little bit more broad. But yeah, so as far as we know, but he's described as the good shepherd, and David, of course, was a shepherd. Chris?
Both David and Jesus, siblings kind of rejected them, didn't like them.
Yeah, both David's siblings and Jesus' siblings, at least for a while, reject him and push him away. Megan? Both ultimately gave glory to God. You come at me with sword and spear, I come at you in the name of the Lord. And how often Jesus said, I'm here to do my Father's will. Absolutely so. Joyce, I think I saw your hand up.
Well,
They're both kings, yep, don't overlook the obvious. What a great insight. Both David and Jesus used weapons that you may not have thought of as the normal weapon for that situation. David goes off with a sling, and it very specifically says, without a sword or a spear, he killed Goliath. So this had to strike people as unusual, and Jesus comes in and doesn't use power and glory, but says, this is what the word says. Thus saith the Lord. It stands written. And I'll throw out one more, and then we'll call it a day. Just as David was willing to go battle for the people of Israel, so Jesus, your King, is always willing to go to battle for you. Always. He did it. You saw him do it, but he's doing it today. And all the forces of evil that are out there are still raging and firing. Your King is battling for you to this very day. And your King will win, just like David did. Amen? Amen. Well, thank you, guys. Isn't that a fun account to study? And to do it from an adult perspective is just really, really cool. Next week, we're going to start to get into when David starts to move into the service of Saul a little bit more fully. And that is going to be some crazy days. So we'll see the reactions to the battle and good stuff, all right? If you've already worshiped, go enjoy in peace. If you've not yet worshiped, come and worship the Lord.